Hey everyone, welcome to the Happy Flosser podcast. My name is Billy Lunt. I am your host, and I am here to talk to you about all things dental hygiene to support you on your journey through the dental hygiene program. Welcome, so glad to have you.
In this episode, we are going to talk about eruption dates. Eruption dates can be really challenging to memorize when you first look at them. There are some ways that you can combine or create groups of information to help you remember the eruption dates or see or notice a pattern that helps create a lasting memory for you. This will make it easier for you to recall the eruption dates with relative ease. It's especially important to know the first teeth to erupt, the pattern or the eruption sequence so that you can understand the concept of the eruption process. You also want to know the last tooth to erupt and the teeth that don't follow the normal patterns of eruption or the outliers so that you can easily retain the information. It does make it easier to learn if you can create some kind of understandable sense to the eruption sequence. I hope this episode helps you do that.
Hey, if you're in hygiene school or just got your acceptance letter to hygiene school, I've got a new course to help set you straight right out of the gate when you first start your program to help ensure a successful transition from the first semester to the second semester and to the finish line. I will help you strategize all the key strategies that you need, understand what the challenges are, and overcome all the obstacles. Learning in dental hygiene school is different than any other program. You've got a lot of assessments that are evaluation style. You need to be able to plan and prepare for that and be successful so that you can become an RDH. And I'm here to do that for you. I have a new course, How to Be a Successful Dental Hygiene Student. You can click the link right in the show notes and I'll show you how to get it done. Congratulations on entering this profession.
The teeth begin to form at approximately 4 to 6 months in utero, and there is an episode on the tooth development process that you can review to understand that a little better. And the eruption of the primary dentition begins approximately 6 to 8 months of age. And there is some variability here because we all know that babies tend to have really wide variety of growth and development process. So you'll see a much wider and more variability among our smaller populations because there's such a difference in 1-year-olds, right? So if you look at the average 1-year-old, that's what our baseline is. But there's so much variations in either directions on these eruption patterns. So keep that in mind as you're learning it. There are several ranges of eruption dates that can be found in the textbooks and the websites online, and this is a result of the variations among different populations. The most important piece of information to know about the eruption of the deciduous dentition is that it starts around 6 to 12 months, with the mandible and the maxillary central incisors being the first to erupt. The first molars tend to erupt just prior to the canines, and the entire process is complete around 23 to 33 months of age, with the maxillary second molars completing the process. So that kind of gives you a broad overview of the primary dentition eruption sequence, and it provides you with the really distinct features that you need to know. So it starts with the central incisors, usually the mandibular incisors first at 6 to 12 months. The first molars come in before the canines typically, and you complete the whole process, the latest being around 33 months. The exfoliation process of the deciduous dentition begins when the permanent tooth begins to apply pressure on the roots of those primary teeth as they develop. The pressure from those permanent teeth trigger the body to activate osteoclast and odontoclast, which as a result will cause the root resorption of that deciduous tooth. The permanent teeth develop just lingual to the roots of those primary teeth, And the primary teeth, remember, kind of guide those permanent teeth into their correct position. The first teeth to erupt in the permanent dentition are the mandibular central incisors, and those erupt around 6 to 7 years of age. At the very same time that those mandibular central incisors are erupting, the permanent first molars are also erupting on both the maxillary arch and the mandibular arch. So you can group these together in your eruption date pattern process. Now, from a clinical perspective, it may be surprising to a parent that their 6 to 7 year old has permanent first molars that have erupted in the dentition. Keep in mind that these teeth come in behind the deciduous dentition, so their child did not lose a tooth in order to have these teeth show up. And so those permanent first molars are non-succedaneous teeth. So sometimes it catches parents by surprise when they bring their young son or daughter in to their dental office and find out that yes, in fact, they have adult first molars in the back at such a young age. So keep that in mind. The next to erupt are the mandibular laterals and the maxillary centrals at 7 to 8 years of age. So consider that by the time the child is 8, they will have the 4 mandibular incisors and 2 mandibular molars on the mandibular arch and 2 central incisors and 2 permanent first molars on the maxillary arch. The maxillary lateral incisors round out the completion of the incisor eruption at 8 to 9 years of age. It is pretty common for this time following the eruption of the maxillary lateral incisors to have a short period of rest, and this allows for jaw growth and further development before the next stage of the process begins. The permanent mandibular canines are the next to arrive and continue the process of eruption, and this happens at 9 to 10 years of age. Now, the last anterior tooth to erupt is the permanent maxillary canine, and when we cover tooth morphology of the canine, it will become really evident to you as to why this tooth takes so long to arrive in the dentition. But for now, just know that it comes in between 11 to 12 years of age. The permanent maxillary first premolar is typically the first premolar to erupt, and it also has the shortest range of eruption dates from 10 to 11 years of age. So the maxillary first premolar is the first premolar to erupt and has the shortest time to erupt, so 10 to 11 years of age. The permanent maxillary second premolar is aligned to erupt at the same time as the permanent mandibular first premolar, and this occurs 10 to 12 years of age. And it may be helpful for you to combine these two as a group for your memory since they have the same eruption date. The last premolar to erupt, and this one is the exception to the norm, and that is the permanent mandibular second premolar, and this occurs at 11 to 12 years of age. And this one erupts last of the premolars, and it comes in at the very same time as the permanent maxillary canines. The permanent mandibular second molar erupts at 11 to 13 years of age, and it is followed by the permanent maxillary second molar at 12 to 13 years of age. Now, with the exception of the third molars, it's important to know that the last teeth to erupt are the permanent maxillary second molars at 12 to 13 years of age. And there's a couple general rules you can follow to help you memorize these eruption dates. The mandibular teeth tend to erupt just prior to the maxillary tooth of the same class. Girls tend to erupt a little earlier than boys tend to have their teeth erupt. Root completion takes about 2 to 2.5 years to finish after the eruption of the crown shows up in the mouth. The exfoliation process of the deciduous dentition begins when that permanent tooth begins to apply that pressure to the roots of those primary teeth. This completes the eruption sequence. I want you to know that there are some really helpful videos that I found on YouTube. And I would say that the best one that I have found, if you type in Maine and NXI, a video comes up that helps you learn a little drawing that you can put on a piece of paper and make sense of the eruption pattern. And what I found was that when you first start doing the Maine drawing and the NXI drawing, the Maine drawing attributes the eruption dates of the permanent dentition, and the NXI drawing is attributed to the primary dentition eruption patterns. And I found that for students, once you start writing that down and memorizing it, it actually helps you memorize it in your head, the eruption sequence. So it may be something that you have to write down when you're first learning the eruption dates, but maybe you don't always need to. And it's something that you can easily recall when you're taking your board exams. So I would go on YouTube and check that out. It's called Maine, M-A-I-N, and then NXI is for the deciduous dentition. And I think there's a couple of really good videos that cover that. So best of luck.
Here's a memory tip for you. I've had a lot of students who have learned the phone number technique to help them memorize eruption date patterns. And this is something that you can easily recall when you're taking your board exams. So for the maxillary arch, the phone number is 781-0062. The central incisor is the 7, and the last digit of the phone number, the 2, represents the maxillary second molar. Now the rule is that in the phone number, all the 1s, 0s, and 2s get a 1 in front of them. And the one exception for the maxillary arch is that the second premolar has a 2-year gap. For the mandibular arch, the phone number is 679-0161. The rule applies that all the 1s, 0s, and 2s in the phone number get a 1 in front of them. And there are 2 exceptions on the mandibular arch, and that is that the first premolar and the second molar also have a 2-year gap. I hope the phone number technique will help you memorize the eruption date patterns for both maxillary and mandibular arch. Thanks for listening today. In the next episode, we're going to be talking about the patient operator position in the clinical setting. The positions of the clinician, the patient, and the chair are important foundational skills that need to be mastered in order for proper ergonomics during instrumentation and treatment in the clinical setting. I hope you join me. Are you looking for study sheets? I've created study sheets that cover the content of this episode. If you're interested or that's something that's going to help you on your learning journey, you can click the link listed right in the description of these show notes. Happy studying! I would invite you to ask any questions at all that you need answered. Sometimes questions come up when you're listening to this podcast. If you have a question, most likely someone else has the very same question. I'd be happy to answer it and would probably share it in a future podcast.